Hey everybody, I am here with my friend and colleague Pat Sehn with Steady State Media. And Pat, you have the distinction of being the first sort of video production specialist that I've spoken to. Everyone else has been in marketing or design, but you're in video. So thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm really looking forward to your insights, especially for the students at Pitt and at Point Park, whom, some of them are in marketing, some of them are in design, but it seems like video is kind of at the center of what they both do. So if you don't mind, and humor me, what's your background? What got you started in doing video work and video production and then ultimately leading up to Steady State?
Sure. So I think I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be in video somehow, which is interesting. I feel like a lot of my colleagues, a lot of people who do video work started with more of the mindset that they wanted to be in film. That's obviously at a younger age, especially when you're getting into it. That's your initial thought is, I want to be a filmmaker, I want to be a director. But having video cameras around really from a young age, I just love the technology and working with it. The high school that I went to actually had a really great program for video production. Got involved in that. There were, the community television was run out of the high school. So that was great. That was kind of my first, real look at what, I could be doing with, good equipment, full equipment.
Right.
So graduating high school, actually started at Point Park.
Okay.
I did. While I was there, I actually got into the film program at Point Park. That was kind of the closest program available that kind of matched what I wanted to do. This is coming up on 20 years ago now. So it's been a while. It wasn't really any sort of digital program at Point Park. It was through Pittsburgh filmmakers. I'm not sure if you're
yeah.
And at the time, Pittsburgh filmmakers was really focused on the art of filmmaking and not so much the practicality of making a career out of it.
The commercial aspects.
Right, exactly. And I kind of knew right away that really wasn't good for me. So I ended up transferring to Pitt very shortly after, got involved in the communications programs at Pitt, specifically some media communications, and then film studies as kind of separate coursework that I was also doing, which was really a lot of the same stuff that I was doing at Point Park anyhow through Pittsburgh filmmakers. Pitt had a relationship with Pittsburgh filmmakers at the time. So I went through my collegiate career, I guess, through Pittsburgh filmmakers and Pitt. My senior year, I got an internship with a company called New Perspective, who's unfortunately not around anymore.
I remember them.
They were a production house. They were a staple in Pittsburgh for a while. It was them and maybe two or three other production companies that were really doing the majority of the work in the city at the time. I interned there for, I think it was the second semester of my senior year. And I actually got the internship with my current business partner, interestingly enough, who I also went to high school with, didn't go to college with, but we interned together at the same place. We both got our first full-time jobs at the same production house, which was a spinoff of New Perspective. It was, it's called On Motion Media. They're still operating here in Pittsburgh. We were the first hires there. And what was really attractive to me about really what New Perspective, Mind Over Media, all those production companies were doing was the blend of the industrial type of video projects that interested me, that kind of business storytelling, and the marketing advertising side of things where you could be a little bit more creative and kind of do some of that work. So from the beginning of my career at those places and at On, we were doing work for not just some large local companies, corporations, but also institutions like Pitt. Probably the most memorable project early in my career that I worked on was the institutional commercial for Pitt that aired during the basketball games and football games and those types of things. So, that kind of, I guess, formed the beginning of my career. As I moved on from On, I actually went back to New Perspective, spent about a year there. And as soon as I got there, I realized that I had some clients who I had been doing a lot of work with, who I felt were loyal to me, and realized that the next logical step in my career was to start my own production company. So the director at the time at New Perspective and I started Steady State kind of behind closed doors and, on our side time. As luck would have it, we both got laid off. This might be the first time I'm making this public, but we both got laid off with our business plans in hand, ready to spin off and start our own company. We got laid off with severance packages, and we're kind of told, good luck. We'll use you for some freelance stuff in the future. And it was literally a week before we were slated to do that. So that was kind of a sign that we were
serendipity right there.
That's right. we were doing the right thing. And interestingly enough, I think the first job that we did when we opened our doors was for Pitt Business. A project for the study abroad program at Pitt Business. So Pitt Business definitely has a place in my heart for that. So Steady State, as Steady State's evolved, we were a production company, solely a production company is what we focused on, and continuing to do the work that we've done our entire careers, and we still do that now. But in the 5 years since we've started Steady State, we've turned more into a marketing focused company. We still do communications videos for corporations and things like that, but we're really starting to shift our focus more towards marketing. Now we have strategy in-house, who my business partner, after he left New Perspective, went to the client side and worked at a couple of technology firms doing marketing strategy. Video is, to your point earlier, it is, a central focus on that students will learn about as far as marketing campaigns go and communications campaigns go, but it's really just a tool in a good marketer's toolbox. And I think that Kevin, his experience being out on the client side and realizing what video was, started to align with what my vision started to be about what video should be. When we first started our careers, video was expensive. Big companies would do very small quantities of video. They would maybe do one, company overview video or a commercial or something like that, and basically blow their whole budget on one video. And now that things have evolved, video is so much more disposable. Obviously, this isn't news to anybody, but the focus of where budgets should be spent has shifted, and I think a lot of companies, a lot of production companies, really aren't adapting to that as quickly as they should be. So the last 2 years is really where we focused on not so much, looking for those project-based jobs, but looking for campaign-based jobs for production, and then helping to supply the strategy behind it.
Well, in addition to that, and correct me where I'm wrong, but like from your end of things, it's okay to do one-off projects, but the possibility of being involved in a campaign level project where you're shooting a lot of video, you're doing a lot of strategy and direction and creative direction, things like that. You want that to occur over multiple parts, so it really encompasses not only the vision that you have for the client, but also your creative capabilities. So you're best serving the client in that respect. So can you talk a little bit about, your interest in that campaign aspect, where a campaign is maybe multiple videos of different messaging, and how you go about, what the process is with that, your creative process.
Sure. So you're right. The project-based work, I mean, it still makes up a very large portion of our revenue. So we are still doing a lot of that project-based work. But what we're trying to help clients focus on is that project-based work, even if it's just, one large image piece for a company, doesn't need to be just that piece. You create a great video about your capabilities and you throw it on your website and share it with everybody on LinkedIn, maybe on Facebook, and then kind of forget about it is obviously not a good use of budget. So what we do is, when we're approached a lot of times with this project-based work, is look at it and say, okay, we can take this longer form piece and break it down into, what is commonly referred to as micro content, where you're covering smaller facets of the larger piece, and giving yourself some more shelf life or runtime with those individual pieces. So that's kind of one way to handle the project-based work. And when you get into the campaign-based work, it's more sitting down with somebody like Kevin, who's on the marketing strategy side, or an internal person at a marketing company, and saying, what part of the sales funnel are you looking to attack with these marketing videos? Here are the formats of videos that we can create that can speak to each parts of that sales funnel, and really create an efficient way to constantly be creating quantities of those videos. If you're going out and shooting one customer testimonial video and just getting one customer testimonial video out of it, again, it's not the most efficient use of your time. But if you're going out and shooting with a client, a client's client, and having them give a testimonial, if you're not looking at ways where you can make that more than one piece, you're not being efficient with your time. So
right.
That's kind of how we go into a lot of those campaigns, is looking at, what are the different formats that we can create video or content that speak to different parts of a sales funnel, and then being as efficient as possible to create as much content for each step along the sales funnel as possible.
So with respect to that, you're doing this video work, and on the strategy side, you have to have a full understanding. You use the term the sales funnel. So you have to have a complete understanding of not only general marketing and sales techniques and strategies, but also what the client does relative to their own strategies and what they've applied and adapted and built themselves in order to make your final output, your deliverable, the most optimal solution possible. And that gives your work, as a consequence, much more depth and meaning to it. And to your point, where you've got some clients that just do one-off things, like, not only is it not an efficient use of their time, but also their money, because they are only thinking about that end deliverable, whereas you guys are thinking about the deliverable as in addition to their entire communication process. And ultimately, how is that deliverable going to augment or enhance what they're already doing? And, and I'm speculating, and not necessarily of your clients, but just in general, those clients that just want that one-off video, they probably aren't even aware of what their true sales and communication practices are.
I think that a handful of clients, not all of our clients certainly, but a handful of our clients will look at sales and marketing separately. And
yes.
What we're trying to help them understand is that sales and marketing should be working hand in hand. And when you have that separation between sales and marketing, and they don't communicate as well, or the purpose of marketing isn't to feed into sales as seamlessly as it should, what you get is, on the marketing side, you get people who are order takers who are going out and hiring other order takers. So a marketing person who says, oh, well, you know, I'm being told, or I know that we need a company image video. I'm going to go hire a video production company that's going to help me put together a company image video. And nobody is really focusing on, you know, what that messaging should be to help sales. How are you speaking to your clients, your customers? Of course, the marketers and the people internally who are bringing the projects to us know who their clients and their customers are, but are they talking to the salespeople enough to know what are their clients' pain points that you're trying to speak to in some of these videos? And you know, a lot of times we'll look at a video or a project, and if there isn't that synergy, then you know, we kind of can tell right off the bat that this isn't going to be as effective as it could be.
So, you know, I wanted to ask you, and this is kind of slightly off topic, but still, I think, relevant. I keep seeing ads for this new video service called Quibi. I don't know if you've seen those.
I have, yeah.
Yeah, where everything is shot vertically. How do you feel about that? Now, so it's shot vertically, but it takes up the entire capacity of the vertical screen. So it's not like you shoot it vertically and then it's condensed down to a horizontal format. It's literally the whole phone screen. How do you feel about that?
I love it. I think that so to back up maybe 2 or 3 years ago, when we started this shift in our focus to being a little bit more marketing centric about our production, one of the techniques that we tried to get a few of our clients, and a few have adapted to really well, a few are still struggling with and fighting here and there, but one of the techniques that we tried to help them focus on was, you don't need us there to help you film all of these videos. You, with a little bit of training, you can be filming a lot of this stuff yourself. Give it to us, we'll put some polish on it, but you should be out there with your camera. You have a 4K camera on your phone. You know, you don't need us for all of this disposable stuff. Again, it's going to shoot through your budget to have us out there so much. So we tried to push this on a lot of people. And the training that we were trying to give people was, you know, the very basics of how to use a phone to film. And it occurred to us very early on that people weren't comfortable turning a phone sideways and filming in landscape mode. And as a filmmaker or a videographer, somebody who's in that field, that you know, I guess when filming yourself became a little bit more common, that would drive people nuts, right? And now I just think it's just, that's how people are comfortable doing it, with selfies, with whatever, with the way they use their phone. They just want to have it vertical like that. 2 or 3 years ago, YouTube, Vimeo, even LinkedIn or Facebook didn't have the responsiveness to take those videos and to have them live in that aspect ratio. So it would just populate with the black around it, right, to fill in the space that wasn't video. Now, as people at LinkedIn or Facebook, YouTube, Vimeo start to realize that this is not going to change, this isn't going away, now there's that responsiveness where I just, right before we hopped on this call, finished doing a couple of videos for a client that is going to live on LinkedIn. It's going to be square, and the way that it displays on the phone and on the browser is going to fit into the post at the way that it should, the way that it was created, rather than squeezing it into a letterbox or doing whatever. So it's becoming more and more acceptable. And I think as technology is starting to adapt to that being a new standard aspect ratio, that vertical video, I think it's absolutely acceptable now. And I think, you know, in a lot of cases, it actually looks good. If you're viewing it on your phone and it was shot that way, that's naturally how it was shot. I think it'll show up and look good that way.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see how a product has completely redefined how a discipline functions, you know, with relation to the changing aspect ratios. And not only that, but it's bringing new voices to the table. So like, you know, every time my wife wants to shoot a video, I say, rotate it 90 degrees, make it landscape. And she's like, I don't want to do that. Just let me shoot it. Let me capture the moment. But I'm like, I need horizontal, you know? And so, or like when we do photos, she'll shoot it vertical and then I'll shoot it horizontal, because I'm thinking about the mediums that I need to apply to,
Sure.
even if it's like my own personal stuff.
Sure.
And so I am glad to see, you know, those platforms and those formats, you know, shifting to fit what the products are demanding.
Sure.
And, you know, with it bringing with there being new creative voices to the table, the democratization of video capture is really fantastic. That's one of the reasons why I enjoy TikTok.
Yeah.
Is because of what people are making. But ironically, I loathe the app and I will never I'll never download it or use it. I'll only use it for like Pitt business if we even venture that far, which I don't think we will. Sure. But nevertheless, yeah, I opened the TikTok app and I'm like, I don't know how to use this.
Yeah.
Like I should know how to use this. I can't figure it out. And then as soon as you open it, it's like video immediately. And the thing that I discovered, and I don't know about yourself, but the thing that I discovered is that I'll happily consume TikTok content,
right,
and Instagram TV or Instagram video content, so long as it's curated, because there's so much of it. There's such a high volume of video content that I'm just as fine tuning it out and having people say, watch this one and this one and this one.
I think it's going to be really interesting to see over the next, you know, however long it is, maybe decade or longer, how much of advertising and marketing budgets are going to get shifted into apps like that. I know it already has started to do that, but I think that, you know, there will be a point in our lifetime where budgets for advertising on Snapchat and on TikTok is going to surpass what you see for broadcasting advertising dollars. You know, obviously there's always going to be the platforms like LinkedIn and Facebook where money's going to be spent, but it'll be interesting to see as it evolves and these other apps start popping up, how much people start focusing more and more on that and start leaving broadcast and, you know, other, I guess, what are newer now platforms, how much they start getting left behind with apps like that.
Right. You know, I don't own an Apple Watch or a smartwatch at all. In fact, I don't even like having things around my wrists.
Sure.
But I was thinking about how, and I don't think the Apple Watch has a good enough processor in it to be able to do video necessarily in a meaningful way. But like, at what point are we going to be watching, you know, videos on our wrist there?
Oh yeah, that's coming for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So switching gears, I want to know, so Steady State is pretty much a remote business. I mean, you have an office and, you know, you can take clients down there, but for the most part, like, you could work anywhere.
That's true. There is something to be said about the employees of Steady State working together and being in the same space rather than having to communicate virtually. I think that's probably been the biggest challenge we've had during isolation here. But that's right. I mean, you know, most of our work can be done either, you know, on clients locations or, you know, out in the field. We do have a studio now in our new office, so we can film some stuff in our office, but, you know, most of the post-production, most of the strategy, all that kind of stuff can all be done at home.
So, you know, how's the pandemic affecting you relative to that?
A good bit. You know, like I mentioned, project work still does make up a portion of what we do. So a lot of that has been either postponed or canceled outright. You know, when we get into being a marketing firm, it's not just the content creation, it's also the support on things like conferences that, you know, our customers are either putting on themselves or going to be a part of, to present at, and we offer support for things like that. So I guess it was as early as February, really middle of February, a lot of those conferences and things like that started getting canceled,
Right.
Or postponed. So that chewed into, and really kind of forced us to start to adapt to how we're going to get that. Our clients are going to get that information out to their clients, their prospects. So, we've been trying to offer, a little bit of a pivot in the way that we create this content or help clients create content. And so far, so good. A lot of people have been receptive to it because, truthfully, nobody's been through this before. So nobody really knew how to react. The tools and the things that we wanted to do, or that we would recommend to clients have always been around. Now it's just shifting the messaging that we would otherwise do in person or at events like conferences, now shifting it into these other modes of content.
So, that reminded me of, so events are getting canceled. You're finding a gap in, your flow of work. I'm on the marketing side, client side, and all of my events are being canceled and I have very few things to do. So I'm trying to pivot and focus on storytelling and narrative from a variety of different perspectives, written, graphic, video, audio, especially, and then just trying to get by and teach my classes.
Sure.
But one of the things that's rippling through higher ed right now, and I know a lot of industries have seen some major disruption, but at least in higher ed, we've seen a lot because our entire business model depends on people to be next to each other. Excuse me. And so like graduation is going, virtual.
Yeah.
And I saw one example of a virtual graduation online on YouTube, and it was just lame. Oh my God. It was very strange. I mean, I don't know what why they were doing a virtual one to begin with. But basically, it was these 6 people, the speakers, the president, the provost, etc. They all had their hat and gown regalia on. They had the stage all built, but there was no one there at all. And they basically just sat down and started reading from a teleprompter or scripted notes on the lectern. And that was it. And I'm thinking, like, there's got to be a better way to do a virtual graduation, especially because the whole thing, the graduation it's visual, it's auditory, it's experiential. That's why you remember it. That's one of its appeals, is it's a thing that you do and you participate in, and it's interactive, even if it's boring.
Yeah.
Right. But do you think that there's a way to use video in a really captivating way to make some of these virtual graduations more than just talking heads?
That's a great question. I hadn't thought about that. I will tell you, I saw one that was, I think it was in Japan. They were doing a commencement where they had.
Is it the Minecraft one?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
But, so it was basically robots with iPads on the top of the robots' heads, and they had the dean or the president of the university standing there, and the robots would come up, and it was the faces, the iPad webinar linked faces of the graduates as they walked up, and the dean delivered a message to each one of the individuals graduating, saying congratulations, thank you for doing this. I think that's a kind of a novel way to approach that, but I think looking for ways that video can replace the in-person experience is very difficult. Outside of do you go to the virtual reality realm of things if that's an option way down the future where it's more ubiquitous that we're using something like virtual reality. Maybe I think as technology advances, there are ways that we can start to try to replace some of that. But obviously, I think events like that, it's really difficult. Being there with your family, being there with your fellow students, that type of thing. I just technology, I think, can only take you so far as of now, anyhow.
Right. And so I'm glad you brought that up because it reminded me of one thing. I don't know if you've ever seen, well, it reminded me of two things, but the first of which is, did you ever see the comedy sitcom Community?
Oh yeah.
So in Community, they did an episode where prisoners from the local prison were able to take classes at the community college, but they were in prison, so they couldn't leave their jail cell, right? So what they did was they put iPads on robots and drove them around campus, right?
Yeah.
So, it's funny because, like, wow, the folks in Japan, they came up with a solution for that situation, right? But really leave it to some sitcom that was just really poking fun at drones and technology to actually come up with a clever solution to that specific problem.
Right. That's funny. I wondered when I saw that if that was their the impetus of their idea was they watched Community.
Right. Well, yeah, that very well may have been. And it also reminded me of Arrested Development back in like 2004, 2005, maybe, where George Sr., the patriarch of the family, he had a surrogate. So he had a guy, because George Sr. was in jail, he'd have a guy walk around with a camera on his head, and they would send video back to the prison. But, I think there's an angle here, a hook for you. So first off, we don't know if higher ed how they're going to react to this after, well, it really depends on how the pandemic breaks out. But
Sure.
will there be brick and mortar classes in the fall? Boston University came out today and said, maybe not. So they're looking at a potential full-on virtual rollout for the fall semester. And if more universities adapt in that way, it's going to make things like virtual graduations even more difficult. But even, some of those linchpin sort of key events, I mean, for God's sakes, collegiate sports, I mean, how's that going to affect scholarship? I won't get into that.
Yeah, right.
But it did make me think of my wedding video, of all things. So we hired a videographer to, essentially do a documentary of our wedding, all the great spots, all the sweet spots and all that stuff. And I'm like, well, if this is how things are going to be looking at, moving forward, why don't we have like a video production vendor, right, such as yourself, come in a couple times every semester and shoot just passive, B-roll kinds of things. It's just all passive, and that way every single year you could make like a flashback video that captures the year, and it's very sentimental. And it's not necessarily wrapped around an event. It's just there. And then you take that over the course of 4 years, and then you assemble that into one, longer video. I think that might be a solution for a virtual graduation. You know what I mean?
So we actually had a couple of schools at Pitt approach us about doing some sort of a video for the graduating seniors that was similar to that. Unfortunately, I think what ended up happening at the end was, well, this is really just going to be a picture slideshow because the footage really isn't there of some of those events. Not all the schools at Pitt have done as good of a job as Pitt Business has in capturing, and capturing a lot of the stuff that goes on around campus and specifically at the school. So just doing picture slideshows really, probably what the juice wasn't worth the squeeze as far as that went. But bear with me as I kind of work through this a little bit. Something that's always really interested me, and I'll get into it a little bit more, is virtual learning and the way that learning management systems can be implemented for not just corporations, large businesses, but even to the university level. I think that having that kind of self-guided learning in a
Mm-hmm.
lot of instances is very helpful, and more effective in some ways, especially in the business community. I think when people find a little bit of downtime and they can log on to a learning management system and go and do their coursework at their own pace, I think it's, I think it can just be that continuing education is probably more effective in that manner. I don't know if that's something that is applicable as much in a university that's brick and mortar the way that
Sure.
it is. But there's certainly a lot of content, and I think a lot of opportunity there to start creating content for a learning management system, even if it's not used in the traditional way that a corporation would, where you're doing just as you're saying, keeping it relevant, going out and filming more and more, on campus and around that to keep the coursework, relevant to the time period that you're in. It's not something that's going to be evergreen and be able to be used year to year. It's kind of getting updated as things go on. Now, the problem that I do see, and this might speak a little bit more directly to the students, at Point Park, or people who are learning some practical education on filming and, the digital coursework, the digital filming that I know Point Park offers. That in-person application, being able to have your hands on the equipment and being out filming with instruction from, a professional or a professor, I think is really invaluable. I don't know how you replace that type of learning, that in-person learning, with on-demand or, that type of learning management system. So, I think that's something to consider. That's something to think about. I didn't mean to deviate from your suggestion there. I did like that idea. But I think that has further implications beyond just being able to roll out a video at the end of 4 years to
Absolutely.
class.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. So we're getting towards the tail end of things. I want to know one of your interns is one of my students, Dan.
Dan, so we actually hired Dan.
You hired him? Oh, great. Okay.
Dan is working for Steady State. He was part of the TOEFL internship program.
Right.
We had him last summer, and he impressed us so much that we brought him on. So
awesome.
Yeah.
He's great. He's killing it in my class. And if he tells you otherwise, no. But Dan is a marketing student at Pitt, and so he kind of came to video work in an indirect way. And my Point Park students, they've got a lot of the software skills. They can probably use all of the apps in the Creative Suite. They definitely know how to use cameras and whatnot, but they may not necessarily know how to apply their video-based skills to the actual profession. So collectively, what would be your recommendation for any student or student now or graduating student, that's interested in video marketing? Where can they get their start? How can they get involved? What do you think?
So I think for a while, my advice has really been the same. And I think it was beneficial for me that somebody kind of passed this along to me. It was, when I started out and just really had a goal in mind of being a video editor. That's what I wanted to do with my career initially when I graduated. And that was the first job I had, was as an editor. Somebody told me along the way early in my career that learning just that aspect of production is going to, in the long run, hamper your hireability, your attractiveness to future employers. Learn as much as you can about each facet of production. Even if you don't end up being a producer, or if you don't end up being a director or a cameraman, you just want to be an editor, you'll have an understanding of what their jobs are and how, as an editor, how that footage gets to you and how they're trying to tell the story and how you're a piece of that. You're not the integral part of telling that story or putting that video together. You know, it's a team effort, and the more you understand where everybody else is coming from, the better the end product is going to be. Because
Right.
while you're not the main piece as the video editor in the final product, your work editing that is just as important as all of theirs are. And if you don't have the similar vision that they had, it's not going to be a cohesive story, and it's not going to be as effective as possible. Now, on the flip side of that, as far as somebody who's more interested maybe in just the marketing side of things, like I know Dan has an interest in photography and video, but he's not at the professional level. He didn't have the professional training to do that. What Dan has taken the initiative of, and what impressed us the most with Dan, was that he wanted to learn the content creation side of marketing, so that he had an idea of, when he sets a strategy up in his head or sets a campaign up in his head, what is my content creation team capable of? Mm-hmm. And how do I communicate with them to get the tools that I need from them to make my campaign successful? So, you know, the more you can learn about what everybody else is doing and the roles at a marketing firm or a production company, you know, the better off you're going to be, the more impressive the projects that you complete are going to be. And again, the more attractive you'll be to future employers as you move along in your career.
And that's the value of speaking different languages, so to speak. You know, I can code websites from the ground up, but I can also design them. But, you know, at the end of the day, I would prefer to have a developer do what they do best, and that's code a site, whereas I can do the front end. But if I can speak the language, the translation is seamless. You know, that point of mutual understanding, that's the center of the Venn diagram.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. And again, the more that you have realistic expectations of what other people are capable of in their role, and what you'll be getting back from them, the more you can be realistic about what you can promise your clients, customers, boss, you know, whoever it is. So yeah, I think that ability to communicate with people when you don't necessarily practice what they practice is invaluable.
So, Pat, if my students are interested in learning more about you, about Steady State, and the things that looking for more advice, the things you have to say, how can they find you? How can they reach out, learn more?
So our website, we try to keep updated with content and information as much as possible. It's steadystatemedia.com. And then you can, find us on Facebook or LinkedIn is really where most of our attention is right now. So I would say connect with Kevin Hospodar and myself, and the Steady State page on LinkedIn. It's probably, again, where we focus most of our attention on, learning new tips and tricks, sharing tips and tricks, and following people that we've worked with and enjoy working with, following their careers.
So this is great. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll get to do this again sometime soon. And if we do, I'm going to obligate you to play that guitar.
Absolutely not. I know three songs really well. That's it. But yeah.
Well, what if I break out my flutophone plastic recorder and we can do like a duet situation?
You're sweetening the pot a little bit, but maybe still not enough.
All right, you get your kids, I'll get my kid. They can be the chorus.
There you go.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Well, thanks, Pat. This was great, and best of luck to you guys in overcoming this pandemic. And I know you'll come out of the other side of this just fine.
Thanks so much, RJ. I appreciate it.